Hello, I'm Steve Phillips, and welcome to a very special episode of Audiobook Club, the podcast that reviews and recommends audiobooks. We're speaking to an historian and a columnist for The Times, Ben MacIntyre. If you've seen the film Operation Mincemeat or enjoy the BBC series SAS Rogue Heroes, well, he's the man who wrote the books that both of those are based on. And following hot on the heels of Colditz, he's just released The Siege, and if we've timed things right, our review of The Siege plus this bonus episode should be coming out on the same day. So double Ben MacIntyre to look forward to. Let's get straight into it. Matt went along and spoke to him quite a while ago back in Adelaide, but it's a great interview, and what a really nice man.
Joining us now, gentle listener, the author of, I think, possibly my favourite book of last year, Colditz, Prisoners of the Castle. It's Ben MacIntyre. Ben, how the devil are you?
I'm extremely well, Matthew, and it's incredibly strange and lovely to be here. I've never been to Australia before.
Have you not?
No.
Well, welcome to Adelaide.
Thank you.
You've only got here last night.
I did, so I'm a tiny bit sort of lagged, but I'm okay. I'm fine.
It's all right, you'll have finished by probably about 4 o'clock this afternoon. You'll have done everything there. Although, really weirdly, on the way here today, it's amazing how British this place can be. We got passed by 4 Triumph stags on their way to some sort of rally or something.
Brilliant.
So really strange things happen in this town.
Brilliant. Well, lovely to be here.
So how long are you going to be here?
About another 48 hours.
And
then I move on to Sydney, where my father was born in New South Wales in 1935, so I'm going to go up to the tiny sheep station in deep country, about 400 miles out of Sydney, to find the sheep station he was born on, which would be great, actually. He never came back. He left here in the war, aged about 6, and never returned to Australia. So it's a bit of a pilgrimage for me.
He's a year older than my dad, so we'll have some frames of reference there in terms of, if we're going to talk about the Second World War, what it means to us as well.
Lovely.
So your dad, he was an Oxford Don, wasn't he?
He was a historian
For a
of
sheep
Oxford.
Station to
It's
an Oxford
quite a
Don.
jump,
That's amazing.
isn't it? Yeah, so he came back in the war, brought up in Ireland, and then ended up in Oxford as an undergraduate, age 17, and never left. Stayed there for the next 50 years or whatever it was. So so Oxford was where I was brought up, in a kind of world of history and storytelling. So that's where that all comes from.
And it shows through. I mean, Steve, my colleague, and I were talking about how it almost feels like you were born to do this.
That's so nice of you to say that. I mean, I feel incredibly lucky. This isn't false humility, but I started writing about spies and the Second World War and all that sort of stuff just at the moment when the British government began releasing the intelligence files. So the two things worked. The timing couldn't have been better for me.
So is that a 50-year...
Yeah, the 50-year rule is an odd one because they don't have to do it. I mean, they can release at 50 years if they want to. And because of national security, they can claim that anything that impinges on national security. But that said, MI5 certainly is very good about releasing stuff. It does tend to release if it can.
That's amazing. To me, I'm still surprised that they do job ads. That's the one that gets me.
In there, isn't it?
Solve this puzzle.
Exactly, and come and join us. Do you remember that old Monty Python joke? You can't apply to... I mean, it's the old Groucho Marx thing. You can't apply to a club that insists on inviting you to it. But no, it's a bizarre way of doing it. But I think it's much better these days. I mean, if you have a proper application process, you don't end up with people like Kim Philby in the middle of it. Well, indeed. You hope.
Yes. So, being in Australia, we loved Colditz, the book. And as I say, being in Australia has been a disadvantage for making a podcast with somebody in the UK. But the one advantage we got this time was the perspective of people who don't necessarily know about Colditz. Yeah. So we, as I said, we started off introducing the episode by going, welcome to Colditz. And then we realised, actually, some of the people I speak to who are my age or 10 years younger than me that I work with have no associations in their head with Colditz.
You have to be of a certain age, and if you're British, it helps, because Colditz is completely woven into our national identity. I mean, if you say at work today it was just like Colditz, everyone in Britain knows what you mean. Obviously less so in Australia and New Zealand, but nonetheless it does still have a recognition here. In America, of course, it doesn't. The word Colditz doesn't really mean anything, but for us it comes freighted with a whole set of kind of assumptions, really. And the traditional story of Colditz is this story of men with moustaches digging their way to a different sort of victory, really, tunneling their way out of this big Gothic castle.
See, even you're doing it. You're referencing films in what you're saying and being so. I think there was Escape to Victory was something it was clearly in your head as you were saying that sentence.
And it's fascinating, really. I mean, you can see why the post-war British world had to kind of make a dignified story out of the prisoner experience, because actually it was horrible for most people, incredibly boring. And so this was a way of sort of somehow seizing valour from tedium, which I think is fascinating in itself. But of course, it's not historical. I mean, that myth is a wonderful legend, and like all legends, it has a sort of central core of truth to it. Escaping from Colditz was something that many of those prisoners tried to do and thought obsessively about. But it's not the whole story of Colditz. It's just one element, really.
It was the thing that jumped out at me was the whole idea where you say not everyone that didn't want to be there was British,
No.
but in terms of the guards as well, obviously many other nationalities, but of course all the guards and their families, they didn't particularly want to be there either.
No, well, the guards in a way were, they were as much prisoners of Colditz as anybody else, and two of them committed suicide. It was a tough place to be, Colditz, particularly for guards towards the end of the war when they were much more malnourished than the prisoners. So you had that strange moment when they had no food, the guards, and so therefore they were susceptible to bribery by the prisoners because the prisoners were still getting Red Cross parcels. So you've got a sort of weird way in which this funny internal artificial society in Colditz is sort of turned on its head by the end.
So the thing that got me was at one point you mentioned there are about 1,000 people on the campus, and I went, my frame of reference, having two 11-year-old kids, is that's about the size of a secondary school.
Yeah.
And all of this myth comes from somewhere that is the size of there's not that many people there in many ways.
There's not that many people, and for long periods, Colditz had many fewer people than that. I mean, at the beginning, there were only about 250 prisoners. So it was, and there were twice as many guards at one point as there were prisoners. So it became a kind of German barracks come prison. It was an odd place, and it sort of changed over time. The myth holds that Colditz was one thing for the whole of the war. It wasn't really. I mean, it adapted and it adopted different elements of the culture as it went along. So it's a strange and evolving community, Colditz.
Yeah. I think a question I only heard this question the second time that I listened to the book, and the question that you ask in the prologue is, what would you have done? So, what would you have done?
Well, it's a really good question, and of course, it's an unanswerable question, because when you're in these circumstances, and the same is true of espionage, when you're thrust into this situation that you have no control over, you don't know when it's going to end. You may be a prisoner forever. You may be killed inside the prison. It's not like a sort of civilian prison where you can chalk off the days on the wall.
You know how long there is to go.
Right,
yeah.
You have no idea how long you're going to be there. So that lends a particular kind of atmosphere to the place. And there were so many different sorts of. I am going to answer your question in a second.
No, hurry. Enjoy
so many
moment.
different sorts of people. There were those who were utterly dedicated to escaping and thoroughly prepared to lose their lives in the attempt. There were those who were very happy to help people escape and help manufacture false papers and make ropes out of sheets and so on. All the sort of ancillary work, as it were, that goes into escaping. There were those who were perfectly happy to spend the time putting on plays and writing plays in some cases, and acting and dressing up and generally doing that. Others wrote. Some quite good bits of literature came out of Colditz. I think I would have been one of those, I suspect.
Yeah, I think that's
well,
fine.
I'm not sure I'd been that one, because I think what I might have... There was a good library in Colditz. I mean, there was a good, steady supply of really interesting books were coming in. I think I might have been one of those that just sat there and read their way through the war. I'm not sure I would have been one of those scaling off the chapel roof or building a glider. I'm not sure I'm made of that stuff.
If I may say, I think the only way that I would end up in Colditz, because obviously I wouldn't have qualified for the army because I can't see very well,
Right.
Is in my role as the useless third son who gets sent to the clergy. I think that's
Well, interesting, because of course the clergy inside Colditz, and there were a sort of clerical group in there, were some of those who were, and I don't want to exaggerate this, but they had a captive congregation. And for some of them, particularly this Methodist minister whose story I found absolutely fascinating. I mean, I wouldn't say he enjoyed
You tell it well. You tell it very
I don't say, well, thank you, but I don't say he enjoyed it, but actually he was in control of the kind of spiritual future of a flock whose trials he was sharing. For him, that was almost a kind of Christian experience and a Christian
purpose
and a meaning. And actually, after the war, he was one of those who found it really, really hard to find another purpose. So I just think the whole question of what would you do, I guess it's the sort of subtext in a way of almost everything I write, actually. I mean, I think even and perhaps particularly the spy stuff, because those really are stories where individuals are kind of caught up in a wider story that they probably can't control and have to make very, very difficult moral decisions inside situations that are ethically fluid and sometimes very ambivalent. So I think, I try to keep at the back of my mind that I'm saying to the reader, come into this world with me. Let me introduce you to a kind of a story that you may not know. But at the bottom of it, try and put yourself in the same position as some of these people, and you work out what you would do.
And I wouldn't be one of the people risking their lives to get out. I would probably be production staff, I would have thought.
Yes. Most were, actually. I mean, in truth, there were very few people who said they weren't prepared to take part in any escape at all. It was a way of building community, and almost everybody contributed in some way or other, but only a handful were those who were desperate to be the first down the tunnel. They were a minority, in fact.
So you say, I think there are two bits of the book. There is the asking the reader / listener, in my case, what would you do? But the other thing, of course, when you talk about the Second World War, there is an element of keeping the conversation alive. And indeed, with my kids' generation, introducing them to the stories. To what extent, when you're writing, do you think about, I've got to make this accessible? Surely, as a historian, the whole thing is you don't make the same mistake again. That's why we study history, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I think that is front and centre. I mean, the reality is, what I tend to do, Matthew, is I take these stories that people think they know. Second World War as a whole, if you like, but Operation Mincemeat and the double crossing in the Second World War, and even the Philby story are things that people often, particularly people of our age, have at the sort of periphery of their understanding. But actually those stories are much, much more complicated and much more interesting than the ones we think we know. And so a way of introducing it to your children's generation, to my children's generation, is to look at that whole period through a different prism. I don't write about the war of guns and bombs and bullets and tactics and generals. I'm really not that interested in that aspect of the war.
Yeah.
I write about the characters and the personality and the way those interact and the situations they find themselves in. Because I think for a modern reader or a modern listener, that's much more intriguing, that whole way of taking a sort of something that you think your grandparents would be interested in and saying, actually, no, this is your world as well. There is
a risk, and I think Steve and I, when we came to Cold and we realised we were going to have to do a 13-hour book on World War II, we had our preconceptions. I remember the wooded hills of the Ardennes, the Maginot Line. I went to the Normandy beaches on a school trip when I was 7. I then went and lived in Germany for a year, where everybody, when meeting an English person, is very conscious of and still apologising for. And I always went, it's going to be one of these ones where there's going to be somebody pushing the little aeroplanes around on a map with a broomstick. And it wasn't. It was the opposite of that. And you engaged us instantly with the human beings involved.
That's so... well, it's good of you to say that, and I hope that is true. I mean, I do think that there's no point in writing books about the war that feel like moral parables, that contain a kind of element of accusation or guilt in them, because really we've moved so far beyond that. There are people are malleable objects and in their souls as well, and lots of different people behave in lots of different ways, and to sort of, the all Germans bad, all Brits good.
All Germans Nazis, indeed.
All Germans, even Nazis.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so back to Colditz again. I mean, very few of the officer class in Colditz who were guarding these prisoners were actually Nazis. Most of them were not. Most of them were army officers who were patriotic and in some cases quite sort of jingoistic, but they were not Nazis. So I think we're sophisticated readers and listeners these days. We can understand that the war is a complicated place. And because our modern world is a complicated place. And to go back to the point that you were making, anyone who thinks they can understand what is happening in Ukraine at the moment without an understanding of what happened in 20th century Europe isn't really paying attention. Putin comes to this, I know this is off our point today, but comes to the world through the KGB. That is his world. And unless you know what the Cold War is, you can't possibly understand what the Ukrainian conflict is.
There's another side to that, actually, which is I want to come to our fathers, because my dad is still alive. I don't know if yours...
No, mine passed away last.
I'm sorry to hear that.
No, a long time ago now, yeah.
But mine is 87 years old, 86 years old.
Right.
And we've all just lived through COVID.
Yeah.
Which, when you think about rationing, the Blitz, evacuation, all of those things, he said it was, and he was evacuated as a kid, and he said that it's worse than the war. But they're comparable traumatic events, and also I think the length of COVID, thinking about the Second World War, was the kaleidoscope of time, a concertina of time. You go, actually, we've just done a 2.5 year one, haven't we? We've done I don't know.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I think one doesn't want to exaggerate the comparison, and of course, the British tabloids, and indeed all the British newspapers, leapt to the wartime comparison. Blitz spirit is going to get us through, and all that. But the truth is, and obviously there is no equivalence between being locked up in Colditz for 5 years and being forced to sit on one sofa and watch Netflix with Deliveroo arriving. Those are different things, but we've all experienced a loss of liberty, and some of us for the first time.
Yeah.
The feeling that our actions and our movements and our communications and our contact with other human beings is being interrupted, being curtailed, and that for many of us is a complete new experience. And I think, in a funny way, writing Colditz during lockdown as I did, I found an odd equivalence. I mean, I really don't want to exaggerate this, but we all do know what it is like to live under duress slightly, and to live in a way that is not comfortable for us, and that we have to think about food supplies, and we have to think about movement and all those things. So, there is an element of that which I think is fascinating.
It's very weird. So in this city, our life wasn't the same as yours.
No.
So when you came on the plane to Australia, you will remember that just before you land, they show you the film of, have you been to a farm recently?
Yeah.
Have you got seeds in your boots?
Yeah.
You, of course, remember sort of the myxomatosis thing that happened here, cane toads, and so they're very conscious of biosecurity in this country.
Yeah.
So they were quite well prepared. And also, you think Australia, it's not Peterborough, Leicester and Northampton. The nearest town to here is Melbourne, nearest other city, and that's 8 hours drive in that direction.
Yeah.
There were border patrols between the two states.
Right.
So our day-to-day life was, we had basically 0 cases until December 2022.
Fascinating.
And then the borders came down at the same time as Omicron, and the graph just went
shooting
straight up like that.
Yeah.
So our life was... So I couldn't go home. I wasn't able to go and see my 86-year-old father. Because I could go, but I wouldn't be able to come back into the country as a foreigner. So I was imprisoned here, but our day-to-day life was very normal. So it's interesting that...
Yeah, fascinating. It's kind of... No, I agree. I think it's a kind of... in Perth, where I've just come from, and even more so, that's a city with the desert on one side and the sea on the other.
Yeah.
They just sealed it off and carried on life as they were before. But I think that in itself has very interesting implications.
Yes.
Because, being sealed off into a sort of artificial community again, that's part of the Colditz story, what it's like to be cut off from the outside world, to be able to hear of the outside world, but not ever be able to make contact with it. That's a very strange human experience.
Human experience. So, obviously, the book opens with a focus on one or two human beings, in fact, one of them pretending to be the other.
Yeah.
We related instantly to that. But I have a strange one. And when I was living in Germany, I was an assistant teacher at a school. And I had a pupil by the name of Sandra Eggers.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So Eggers became instantly relatable to me because I know somebody with that surname.
How funny.
What I can detect, though, is, and the way I put it before was, the huge amount of research that goes into the book. It felt to me like if you wanted to check a fact, you might head to Eggers' diary or check for the timing of something. I felt I could hear the work that went into that.
I think that's right, Matthew. I mean, Eggers is really the unacknowledged narrator in some ways of this book.
So I'm not making it up. Good.
No, not at all. I mean, I've just found him the most interesting character. He's punctilious, he's fastidious, he's annoying, he's very, very rule-orientated. He's very Prussian in his way. But he's also, and this is the head of security at Colditz, he's also rather sympathetic and humane and civilised.
And a diarist. You've got him like a diarist.
I know you are. God, I mean, they're absolutely gold dust for what I do. But, but he's quite an honest diarist. He's not writing for publication. I mean, it was published in German, but it's not intended for publication. And so it therefore has that kind of immediacy that is so valuable when you're writing a narrative non-fiction book. And, and his fate, my goodness, he really suffered. And I think after the war, and I think that's sort of interesting in a way, but without rancour. He was a fascinating man. But his whole approach is, he was a schoolmaster in Cheltenham, before the war. He's an Anglophile, and his whole approach is that of a rather irritable but weary schoolmaster who is not going to beat the living hell out of the pupils but would really quite like to.
Actually, I've got the vision in my head of you as a schoolmaster now, having spent half an hour with you. Hold on.
Oh, no, I wouldn't be able to keep any kind of discipline. I'm far too kind of...
Yes, but I think that's probably why you'd end up tired.
Probably. But no, so his whole approach was, these are naughty boys who need to be kind of kept in line, but, they're just naughty boys. I think at times his patience was stretched to absolute breaking point. But he is a sympathetic character, and he ended up becoming much more central to the book than I thought he would. But he wasn't the only German bearing witness, if you like. I mean, there were several others who kept diaries, who sort of realised that this was going to be an important moment in history and sort of put it down on paper. God bless them. But I mean, Eggers is also the archivist of Colditz. I mean, he's the one who collected all the photographs, all the disguises, all the escape attempts. And in some ways he became more obsessed by escape than any of the escapers. I mean, he really did. He treated it as a kind of branch of sort of philosophy, really.
Yeah.
And became rather sort of celebrated within Germany as a result.
So did you read his diary in print in German? How did you consume him?
How did I first come to it? No, it was translated. It was translated eventually. It was a very small edition. So I read the translation, then I went back to the original, which is the best way to do it, I think. It's I mean, interestingly, Colditz doesn't really have much purchase in Germany. I mean, for obvious reasons in some ways, but it's interesting. It's not a story that they're familiar with. And indeed, if you visit Colditz, which I thoroughly encourage your listeners to do, you can stay there now. Part of it's a youth hostel.
Airbnb.
Well, it's actually rather more comfortable than that. You can stay in the German barracks. And I spent about 2 weeks there, and it was I loved it. I mean, loved it. It's a very creepy place, but it's rather beautiful in its way. But yeah, so it's it stands there. But the German locals, I mean, if you go down into the town of Colditz, you can order a Colditz burger at the local burger shop.
Is it made with powdered egg?
No, but you see, they don't get the joke at all. It's called the Colditz burger because it's the town of Colditz. None of the kind of associations that we have with it, exist at all.
Now listen, I've taken much of your time already, but audiobooks. Thank you so much for taking the time to narrate the audiobook yourself. When we see read by the author, it's not necessarily a good thing.
I can imagine.
And you often see, if you follow these things specifically in audiobooks, you'll see authors many times going, oh, my publisher has hired me a studio, I'm going to read my own audiobook. And there's the iPad on the music stand, and then you don't hear anything after them from day 2 when they realise what a slog it's going to be.
It is a slog. I love it. I actually really enjoy reading my own books. I'm not sure I do it terribly well.
You do?
Well, that's very kind of you. But I also have a kind of a lisp that gets worse as I get tired. So when I was trying to record the SAS book, I ended up recording
that's unfortunate of you.
Yeah.
I don't perceive your list, but if you're doing an SAS book, that's unfortunate.
When I get tired and I'm talking about the SAS parachutist, sort of the whole thing becomes completely kind of... But no, I love doing them, and I think it's a great way to hear your own narrative voice coming back to you from yourself, if that makes any sense.
Do you have those moments where you go, I wish I hadn't written it like that?
Yes, of course.
Or do you read aloud as you write? Because the text itself feels very spoken.
Oh, no, I certainly don't consciously do that. It may be that the sort of cadences of my writing sort of lend themselves in some ways to being spoken. It's a good question, actually, whether I don't really think about it that way. But look, as a frustrated actor, I love the performance element of all of this,
okay.
and I'm sort of lost in admiration for the sound technicians who are so brilliant at being able to say to you, actually, there was a slight hesitation there, or you very slightly mispronounced that word. And
can you have a sip of water?
Can you have a sip of water and do it for the 8th time? But all of that is great, really, and I just think it's sort of... I love it. What I have to stop myself from doing is doing the accents. At one point when I was recording the Colditz one, they said, just stop you there for a second. Just want to remind you that you are not acting this, you are reading it. And that was helpful,
yes,
too.
The danger of coming across as a terrible racist.
Well, exactly. Anyone can do a sort of German accent.
Yes.
You really don't want to be going down that route.
You don't want to do the Indian one, though.
No, definitely not. No, well, that's a wonderful story.
It is a beautiful story. I just wanted to, on another sort of behind the scenes, I watched the BBC's SAS Rogue Heroes miniseries, as well as reading the book, or listening to your book. What's that? And I actually also saw Operation Mincemeat the movie recently. And what is that process? Is it heartbreaking to have your work torn apart? There was romance in SAS Rogue Heroes.
I know.
Television.
I know.
The Lee Child thing where Tom Cruise got cast as 6'4" Jack Reacher.
Yeah.
And he kind of ignores that and brushes it away. And
yeah.
Do you squirm?
The truth is, I love it.
Hey.
And they could, there is something wonderful about watching one story going through another iteration. And it's not my story, and others will tell the story again in a different way, and others will come along and write the Colditz story. I hope not too soon, but somebody will come along and do it, and that's as it should be. Look,
you're telling a story as well, aren't you? You're being quite selective in the bits that you present,
absolutely.
And there's just an even more distilled version of that.
Yes, I never make anything up, but it is my story, and I choose what to put in that story, and that is what fiction writers do. Look, I love them. I think they're absolutely brilliant. I mean, the SAS Rogue Heroes, Steve Knight, who is a genius, actually, has taken, he's the Peaky Blinders producer. He's made Khaki Blinders.
Hey!
Kaboom. He's taken that kind of feel and added it to a wartime story, and it's incredibly compelling. It's not a history, it's not a documentary version. That would be unwatchable, I suspect. He's imagined himself into this world and created something that it's not 1,000 miles away in its feelings, in the kind of emotional core of that story. It's actually very true to what was going on. Yes, he's invented a female character in the middle of it. Yes, he's got a love affair. There are elements of it but again, it's what we were talking about earlier. It's great if these stories come to a new, younger audience.
Can I say, I know this isn't a younger audience, but great use of AC/DC.
I know, isn't it brilliant? I agree. And we all think, oh, that's anachronistic. But, 10 minutes into the series, you've forgotten that it's anachronistic and you're thinking, whoa, that's taking me along.
Yeah,
absolutely. Wait for series 2, which we're just about to start filming in Croatia. It's going to be a really wild ride.
The next thing, as you reach the end of the interview, you go, what's next? what are you writing at the moment? And
I'm-
will there be a Colditz miniseries?
Well, okay.
Or can you not talk about that?
No, definitely I can. I hope very much there will be a Colditz mini-series. I mean, you and I remember the black and white TV series in the 70s. This is going to be completely different. And it's the same group, it's the same screenwriter, brilliant screenwriter called Alex Carey, who wrote the script for A Spy Among Friends, which is another of my books that's just been made into a TV series. So they are going to do Colditz. And I think, judging by what Alex has done so far, it's going to be brilliant, because I think they're going to try and tell it from different perspectives. So it's not going to be a kind of cheerful chaps all winning the war again. It'll be, one episode will be from the German perspective, one will be from the perspective of the only non-white officer in Colditz, Birendranath Mazumdar. One will be from the point of view of the woman spy down in the town. So there is a way of doing it, I think, that will be completely different. But so I'm really looking forward to that.
But it's through the lens of the story that you've plucked out.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
lovely.
probably have
give
much.
yourself some credit, man.
Oh, bless you. Well, I'll have much more to do with that series, I suspect, than I did with SAS. I'd love to be involved more closely in that, and I think Alex and I work very well together. We worked pretty closely on A Spy Among Friends together. That became
The pace of Colditz is going to be different, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
It's not going to be hurtling through the desert, listening to AC/DC.
No.
It's going to be...
No, it's going to be an enclosed theatre, if you like, and that's, in a way, that's gold dust for a limited series TV. You can it's like having a kind of precinct, if you like, as they do in Mad Men or in any number of police procedurals. The central precinct is kind of where the action takes place, and then you go outside and come back in again. So I think that should be really interesting. And as for me, I'm heading back into the Cold War.
Okay.
That's my next one, and I'm going to be...
You remember that one?
I remember that one. Boy, do I remember that one. So I'm going to be doing 2 books set a little later on. One is going to be the story of the SAS embassy siege, which you may remember, which was when the Iranian embassy in London... the Iranian embassy, the first one, when that was taken over by terrorists, and the SAS abseiled in to end it. And so that's going to be a sort of TikTok thriller. That's a kind of minute by minute, when the SAS is being very helpful. So that'll be the first time that's been told in full, which will be great fun, I think.
It's kind of a 24 style.
Yes, exactly, sort of chapter by chapter. And then I've found this extraordinary Cold War story set in revolutionary Iran, which is going to be, I hope, it's going to take a while to dig that out.
That's going to be hard.
That's trickier, but not impossible. It's amazing how these records survive.
Well, I'm incredibly lucky in that I've only read 2 of your books. I've got more to come. While I'm waiting for your Iranian adventure,
fantastic.
I get to go and seriously, they have brought me such joy.
Oh, well,
So
that's
thank you so
really
much.
kind, Matthew. Tucky and I would say. And I hope you enjoy them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for your time.
It's been a pleasure.
That was awesome.
A huge thanks again to Ben MacIntyre for his time. Hopefully we'll catch up with him soon. Can't wait to see what he's up to next. Next week, of course, we are asking you what your favourite audiobook of all time is for our regular episode. So not too tall in order. Let us know. All the socials, particularly Instagram at Audiobook Show, where we're having lots of chat and fun and games there as well. Until then, we'll see you soon. Take care.